Just record. There you go. Right, great. We're recording finals of AIV 2023. So are we good to go, Lodge?
Yep, we're all
All right, great.
We should be good.
All right, great. So let's begin this grand finals by welcoming PM. Here.
Thank you so much, Honorable Speaker. I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. Happiness is found in ignorance. This tract creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you move on with the relationship, you will be significantly unhappier. But even if you use this information to break up, you'll be even more unhappier. So no matter what comparative OO tries to set for their side, they will lose against the G because this person will be significantly worse off on their side. So now, first, how knowing the infidelity occurred destroys your emotionality. We have several mechanisms. Number 1, you question every other action of this person and also of any other important person in your life, because the implicit premise is that A, people that say they're truthful to you may lie sometimes. 2, people are willing to hide things that they know you have the right to know. In a first dimension, this harms immediately your relationship with this person because you question every other action, and given that it was there personally, they cheat on you, you question directly all the actions you give. But we go a step further and we say you probably question also the actions from your friends. You're distrustful in general of other relationships because you just think that people have the capability of lying, which is something that you are unlikely to think if you have 10 years of a relationship. You build a strong sense of trust and what loyalty means. You value loyalty very highly. So if someone breaks loyalty in the highest level, you have no reason to think that other people or the same person cannot break loyalty in the shorter levels of its expression. Number 2, your self-esteem is wrecked because you're most likely to think the reason they cheat on you is your fault. People who are cheated on tend to overthink a lot. They think, why was the reason that this person cheated on me? Is there someone that's hotter and cuter than me? Is it that I'm not good at bed? Is it that they were never happy with me to begin with? Do they love me or no? You think that it is inherent to you and there's something wrong with you, which makes this person to cheat you. So moving on to the future, you will think that that thing that's wrong with you never was told in those 10 years, and you probably feel very bad. You feel like you're not worthy of love, or at least that people can cheat on you because you're not valuable enough. Number 3, if you keep the relationship, you sabotage it. Because you're biased to think that they'll do this again, right? If you try to keep the relationship because, for example, you have 10 years, or because you have a house together, or because you have strong commitments emotionally, like a dog, you will be significantly worse off because you will think and you will overthink and you will rethink different scenarios of this person cheating again. You will create very explicit images of this person cheating on you whenever this person goes out and so on. So you're more likely to, for example, mistreat this person or to judge this person or to over-exaggerate situations moving on in the future, and that's just lowers the quality of the relationship. But even if you break up, you feel worse. We have 4 reasons here. A, people around you may judge you for breaking up with this person, right? Your friends and family will tell you, this happened so time ago. Why are you so revengeful? Why can't you be merciful? Why can't you consider that you have almost potentially your future with this person? So you feel bad if you break up because you feel like people around you will criticize you and judge you heavily. Number 2, you feel like you lost the love of your life. After 10 years of relationship and starting a family together, you're most likely to think that this person is your soulmate, given this is a very common narrative in the world. What does this mean? That means that you feel like you lost something that's extremely meaningful, which is irreversible, right? And that just makes you feel pretty bad. Number 3, you give up important things like your house together. You have to move, you have to separate, you give up your dog. All this feels you like you not only lost this person, but you lost other things that were valuable. You probably had friends in common, which you are likely to lose if you break up, and are the meaningful things you value. But number 4, you will still, moving on to the future, associate a lot of things with your ex. So let's say you keep the dog, for example, like some songs say, you're still likely to associate the dog to your ex and still feels worse in the comparative. Now, let's assess our side and not knowing how it's better. Hey, this is an important contention in the debate because I know what they will say. If anyone here was cheated on, we always are told that, hey, a person does it once, they're likely to do it again. No, we're going to give you 2 reasons why we think this person will be loyal moving on to the future. A, at the later stages of a relationship, let's say 10 years, which is what this motion is about, your partner is very unlikely to cheat because they feel like the trade flows is significantly high. Maybe in the first year, this person didn't know that you were the love of their lives. Maybe this person didn't have emotional commitment to a high degree, but this person didn't have invested things like a house. Like even rationally, the action of cheating becomes less likelier as a relationship moves on because you have more to lose. But even if it's like an irrational thing, this person has probably developed stronger feelings for you. So irrationally and emotionally, it still makes less sense to cheat on at this point in the relationship. But two, and this is very important, often people then cheat tend to overcompensate for having cheated in the future, and they either become extremely loyal or they at least become extremely nice to you, like to make sure that you never think about this person having patterns of showing that they could potentially cheat. Now, why is it important to maintain the relationship, having proven that this person will be loyal moving on to the future? We have three main reasons. Number one, having a 10-year relationship means that you gave up a lot of things. You haven't lived with your family for many years. You haven't developed profound relationships with friends for many years because you have been sharing most of your time with just one person. This means that you don't have places to go if you lose the relationship. You're very unlikely to have emotional support, at least sufficient emotional support, which is something that opposition has to deal with. Number two, because of how much you have invested, any other outcome other than continuing with this relationship will be seen by yourself as a waste of time. And number three, having a relationship of this kind is extremely important in terms of financial support and certainty that it gives you. Note, having this relationship, it's probably the best chance that you have in your life. Noting that if you break up with this person, especially in this particular way, you're unlikely to build other relationship of this degree because of how wrecked your trust it was and because of how wrecked your possibility to trust others was. Point to closing.
How do you know this person hasn't cheated on you more recently?
Because more recently, we gave you two mechanisms as to why moving into the future, it is less likely for people to cheat. But let's gonna assume a very strong scenario. Let's say this person cheats regularly. Who cares? No harm has been done to this person materially. We're gonna be extremely utilitarian in this last part of the case. Even if this person cheats every Sunday with the coach of the soccer team of her son, it doesn't matter, insofar as we never know. Why? Because the consequences of knowing that this person cheated are irreversible. It's severe, extreme damage. And those emotions that someone feels when it's cheated on and they know are parasitical. They're likely to eat up on every other positive emotion that you feel, and any other negative emotion that you experience becomes even more negative when you know that someone cheated on you. So even if that's the case, worst case scenario, so we already preempted all the speeches from opposition, from LO to moving on to UPWIP, we win this debate. In conclusion, being dumb is quite good. Being ignorant is better. We are very happy to stand in opening government.
Thank you for that speech, Prime Minister. To open the case for opposition, let's welcome LO.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, thanks. Let me just sort logistics out a bit. It's very windy. Right. Starting in 3. So when I saw this motion, my first thought was to throw the motion. And then Rido said she wanted to win. Then I figured that sounding cool sounded more important. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to run two things in this speech, and maybe Rido will go back to being sin. The first thing we're going to prove is that what you want to do in life and how we make decisions in life is entirely outcome independent or significantly outcome independent. The second thing we're going to argue is that the truth has value to you, and consequently, independent of practical outcomes, you prefer the truth. At this point, it should be fairly obvious that if we can prove this, Gov is out. So first, why is what you want to do outcome independent? And the first thing I want to note is that as human beings, we aren't actually purely utilitarian for several reasons. The first is that we value utility differently. What I think is beneficial may not be the same as what my teammate thinks is beneficial. I would rather be watching football, but here I am. Second, identity formation is what makes us unique. At the point that we are all utility chasing, presumably that would mean that, broadly speaking, a lot of things that we want would be very similar. But as human beings, the reason why we feel self-esteem and we feel different and consequently have means to cherish and care about ourselves is because of the different decisions we make from each other that we consequently think give us moral value as independent moral agents and independent human beings. Consequently, utilitarianism itself isn't the way in which you make decisions on a day-to-day basis. But further to that, I posit that we behave in a particular way even when no one can use it against us, and even when you have no repercussions on any other individual. That's why, for example, we do good things when no one watches. We, like most people do, or would like to think that they would, which arguably is more important here, throw away litter even if no one was there to catch them for littering. Most of us cringe at our past selves and memories of our past selves, even if nothing actually happened or nothing was actually accrued. We hope that we didn't do embarrassing things in the past that we don't remember, even though nobody might ever remember this and tell us. The reason for that is because our impression of ourselves and our identity of ourselves exists not just to our future self or others. It exists at every single moment in time where we make judgments on our identity. We make judgments on how much we like ourselves and how much we identify with who we are, whether we are comfortable with the people who we are. Consequently, if something is a bad idea, we non-consequentially lean away from actualizing those particular bad ideas. The implication of proving this is that I recognize in this debate that if you take their side, you will never remember that you took this decision. And consequently, there is no harm that will actualize to you ever from taking this decision. But that cannot be the metric by which we judge the debate. It's not just because a better thing happens to you. It's not just because you live a better life. It's about whether in that immediate moment, living a better life in the future would be what you prioritize at the point they are making that decision. And this goes into the second part of the argument, which is why the truth and living the truth has value to you. The first way I'm going to suggest this is just the experience machine like analogy, right? If someone was hooked up to an experience machine that constantly made them happy and just fed them happy dopamines and happy thoughts, they might be pretty happy. But the rest of us would think that that's pretty pathetic because it was just a constructed experience for the individual. Consequently, if you ask most of these people, would you like to be in the experience machine? Most people would say no. If you're really charitable, you could suggest that that proves that people don't like being lied to. But I suspect what that really proves is just that utility is not the only thing that matters, and dopamine hits are not the only thing that matters at the end of the day. So that leaves us with the burden to prove why it is valuable to live a truth and why you don't want to live a lie. I want to note that this is different from wishing that a bad thing didn't happen to you. We might all wish, like we might all sit there and wish that we didn't get cheated on, for example. But if the reality is that it happened, then the question is whether we want to live with that particular reality. And again, there are several reasons why I think on balance, we would prefer to live in that reality. The first is that humans generally don't like being lied to. At the point that, for example, you get cheated on and you find out that other people knew about this, most people get upset with those people for not telling them. Because even though, not because like they had to deal with it later, because presumably that would buy them time, but because there was time in which they were living a lie. In the same way that you don't like making decisions based on fake news that politicians give you, even if it never comes home to roost, right? Even if it doesn't actually make your life worse, the reason for that is because we like to make decisions tied into reality. That's because reality is the only reality that we know, and consequently our self-worth builds on that particular reality. The denial that reality therefore questions everything else that we know about ourselves and we believe about ourselves. We think that in and of itself is a bad thing, and consequently you would not want to inflict that onto your future self. Yes, closing.
Yeah, so I think presumably this motion also assumes that you know the truth, and you're based on the truth that you know, you're making the decision to erase your memory. Why is it different?
Because in future you will not know the truth that existed. Second, the second reason, right? We all want to be the hero of our own story. Like we generally do, most people have, like, even when people don't have very much self-esteem, if you think about the way in which you frame your experiences, you are at the center of all of it. And consequently, when you think back, you craft narratives around yourself, which makes you inherently the hero of your own story, regardless of the self-esteem thing that OG talked about. The implication of that, however, is that everything you do in that story has no value if you're able to control every last bit of that story. And the reason for that is that your value comes through resistance, right? That's why, for example, people who have with a lot of privilege don't like admitting that they got to where they are because of privilege, because that would cheapen all of the effort that they went through, all of the resistance that they went through. So people can't just have it easy and be happy. They need to believe that there is something tough about their life. This is not to say that you really, really want to live the success of being cheated on, of like getting over being cheated on. But what it is to say is that at the moment taking this decision, deciding that you can control reality and play God cheapens every other part of your existence. And consequently, we think that is not a decision that you're likely to want to make. But finally, unhappiness can fairly lead to future happiness, right? Like people always say that they didn't realize how much better their life would be, things like take unexpected turn, God's plan, etc. The point to note here is that at that moment, two things. The first, that you don't know how you're going to weigh your current unhappiness against your future unhappiness. But second, and more importantly, given everything I've said, the future happiness seems significantly cheapened. What then do people weigh on? I posit that people weigh their decisions value independently. And the reason for that is people like to make decisions independent of the future practical value that will come about as a result of this decision. For example, religion. People follow religious laws independent of whether they know for sure it is heaven or hell. People follow the law even though they might not get caught. The reason for this is that our identities as individuals and the way we value ourselves and the way we identify as ourselves, we don't want to link that to things that are arbitrary and external to our control, because doing that means that we ultimately seek the maximal degree of agency for ourselves, vis-a-vis a world in which you held true to the belief that we think you likely have, which you don't want to lie to yourself at any point in time. That means that you are able to hold that consistent belief. And that means that even though you lose the agency to rewrite your memory, you maintain the agency to control your life and control the way in which you believe in your degree of self-respect. We posit, therefore, that breaking this commitment in this one instance makes you feel lesser, makes you feel immoral. That's why we would not do it. We propose.
Thanks for that speech, Leader of Opposition. Now to go back to OG, let's welcome DPM. Here.
Just a second so I can turn the lights on. It's quite literally 5:30 a.m. Before I start, I'd like to tell Mati that I love him very much. He's someone very dear to me. Life's a bitch. We got our balls kicked pretty hard in the Spanish World. But if Messi could win the World Cup after all these years, after all these failures, who says that we can't? So I'm going to set up my timer. I just like some confirmation if I'm audible and stuff.
Yep, loud and clear.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. Happiness is found in ignorance. Distrust creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you move on knowing this, you'll be significantly happier. And even if you use this information to break up, it's likely that to leave severe trauma on you and disable your ability to meaningfully engage in relationships moving forward. The impacts of this are not limited just to this situation and possible breakup or the relationship that will ensue, but will affect your life as a whole. The most important thing on this debate is your well-being and your ability to live your life without feeling completely miserable. Note that knowledge is not valuable by itself, right? But rather it's contingent on how much value we can get out of it. We do believe that knowing stuff gives us a wider array of choices, but it comes with associated costs. We'll prove how costs are way higher than the benefits, and thus no one reasonable will choose to keep knowing this in the future. Know that this affects your ability to feel safe in your own life. How much do you trust your partner or future ones? If you can sleep at night when your partner goes out with friends or new partners that you are recently meeting, right? The constant reminder of that event will follow you, will break you, no matter how much you try. Proving that we are not completely utilitarian, it's not the same as proving we are not utilitarian on this specific issue, right? Ask anyone that is unable to trust their loved ones, that is being consumed by insecurities, that feels unsafe in the most intimate space of your life, if they trade knowledge for misery again, the answer is no. Ask people that have lost something very important in their life if the resistance that they have developed is more important than what they lost, a loved one, their body if they were crippled, or the well-being they have lost if they are now in poverty. What we say from opening government is that this will inevitably cripple you emotionally and mentally, and no one would choose this if they can get an easy way out. Let's divide this debate in both the rational and rational side. Note that having rational certainty of something does not mean that your brain will accept that information willingly. You do know that the terror movie villain doesn't exist, but you can't sleep in fear, right? You rationally know your partner loves you, but your past experiences and insecurities push the intrusive thoughts that it might be a lie. Rationally, it is very unlikely that your partner will cheat again. Why? Firstly, the exact context in which you were cheated on. It was early in the relationship. You were still getting to know each other. You didn't know if this wouldn't last. You probably didn't even know their past or their future, right? For someone in that position, being unfaithful isn't necessarily a sign of going to do it again or being a serial cheater. Moreover, in some relationships, even the rules of exclusivity are unclear in the first stages or the first time they are together. By the looks of it, you have been together a long time, right? And this before you would make commitments this big in your life. This means that when this occurred, your partner was probably infinitely more immature and less responsible than what they are now today. It is very unlikely that they will do stupid shit again like we do when we were young. It was like literally 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago, I was willing to throw hands over the discussion of if Ronaldo or Messi were better, right? Moreover, more people usually are more irresponsible, less caring about their loved ones, and less caring about their future when they are younger. It has been 10 years, right? And this is something that probably has radically changed. The second big reason we believe that your partner will not cheat again is commitment, right? A house is a brutally difficult decision to make in this economy, right? It means that you have spent upfront at least 100K or you have gotten in debt for at least 10 years of your life. A dog itself is a 10-year commitment. If your partner did all of this, they are also sure as shit that you are someone that is worth keeping for as much time as possible. They are showing off the strongest sign of commitment possible. The process of losing both these elements is way too emotionally, financially, and physically taxing on anyone. It means that you'll probably fight over who takes the dog. It means you'll probably lose what it seems that to be the other half of the orange. It means you have financial obligations towards a house that reminds you of one of the cheapest breakup possibles for a decade, right? We know that the risk is something so hard, so dangerous that no one will probably cheat if they are a serial cheater. But for the likes of it, it was one time. You are not sure if that has happened again, and it was at the beginning, right? It's probably not going to happen again. Let's compare these two opposition cases. One, if this person was a serial cheater, right? The harm that this will create for you is incomparable. Relationships that last more than 3 years are rare as hell. Moreover, the ones that imply a fucking house and a dog are extremely rare. If someone was doing this, was cheating constantly on you with this characteristic, it would be completely impossible to ignore it and move on. It will follow you to the rest of your life and make you miserable if you try to move on into new relationships. Note that the up case is very contingent on the damages of denying yourselves of the truth. Here's the catch. You won't know that happened, and it's recognized by LO, right? Yes, you don't like being lied to, but you won't know that lie happened in the first place if you take the pill. For anyone that takes a decision, this is completely real, right? The relationship will be real. It's just this was never something that existed on our reality. Now let's talk about the irrational side, but before I'd like to take a point for Sio.
If someone was watching you shower through a little peephole, would you want to know?
I mean, here's the question, right? Is that comparable to a relationship that has lasted 10 fucking years, that implies a dog, that implies a house and probably a mortgage, right? Of course, we'd like to know, but because it's something that happens once, right? But the impact that it will have if it's a fucking continuous situation that has so much emotional implicances, so much emotional possible damages, and so much emotional possible trauma that will generate after so much time, will probably change the decision, right? Even if it's something disgusting, if that was the damage that was going to cause me in my life and would make me unable to have a shower in peace, I probably would like to be watched and do not know, right? That's the key difference, and that's why your example is at best disingenuous. Irrationally, the opposite is what is going. Is irrationally, the well-being is going to be fucked up. Why? Every piece of information in your brain accumulates and connects. The stories of the infidelities you have heard, the cases of people you know, your insecurities about your looks, your intelligence, your emotional abilities. This is not something that you can control, and our mind is independent to our will. Your peace is broken irreparably. You think you know that your partner won't do this again, but you can't enter their mind and make sure about that. You won't be able to sleep. You won't be able to trust their friends at work. You fear that it's going to happen again, and the jealousy will lurk in your brain until you fucking die. If you don't tell this to people, you have to carry this burden forever. But if you tell them, the mixed reactions will probably mess you up. Conflict will always arise. You are prone to discuss, right? The problem is that when you discuss, all the fear, all the rational thoughts are going to come at the front of your brain and will make you incredibly miserable. We're going to take a pill. Ignorance is bliss. We're very proud to propose.
Thank you for that speech, Deputy Prime Minister. Finally, to close the opening half and go back to OO, let's welcome the OO. Here.
The thing that makes life valuable is that the experiences we have are real and the fact that we aren't necessarily living a lie. This is what Sean tells you when he essentially talks about Robert Nozick's thought experience of the machine, right? You can essentially plug yourself into a virtual utopia, but most people, when presented this option, don't want to do it because they consider it to be a suicide of sorts. What this means and what OG does not understand is that happiness is a byproduct of real experiences, things like valuable relationships, things like friendships, things like the fact that your partner actually likes you, right? The value of this is that OG does not understand that happiness is not an outcome we are even going for on this debate. But happiness is essentially not what Sean goes for when he talks about this. What Sean talks about is the interim period when you make that decision, right? Whether you choose to prioritize your quote unquote tentative future happiness over your dignity, over your self-worth, over the possible self-actualization you can experience. So two impacts of this, right? I think first of all, I want to point out that OG does not deal with Sean when he gives you structural reasons as to why people will make decisions for reasons other than just maximizing their happiness, right? Sean tells you that different people have different preferences for utility, that we feel different and valuable because of the different decisions we're able to make in life, that people behave in particular ways independent of outcomes, right? Like, i.e., that we do good things when no one is watching. The value of all of these arguments means that it essentially takes out any possible arguments from government bench on the idea that your life will essentially be better off, because that's not something we're considering. The second thing I want to point out is the fact that happiness is ignorance only in so happiness is bliss insofar as you're only ignorant, insofar as you do not have any more ignorance on this, insofar as government bench never really proves that you're going to be ignorant for the rest of your lives. We don't think they're able to cop this benefit, but I will deal with that later on. I just want to point out that the fact that we can simply delete something that bad that happened in our past does not necessarily make these experiences more valuable or that you're more likely to be happy, right? I think we'd all think it's quite fucked up if your boyfriend hit you once at the start of your relationship and you could simply forget it and move on to be happy with it, right? I think intuitively speaking, we all know that there's something incredibly wrong with making that decision. This is something an individual would likely to be factored into their decision making at that point in time. I think I want to point out that when you're making the decision, it's your happiness or the dignity and self-worth, right? And happiness and sadness is irrelevant in this debate, as Sean already points out on a principle level. What this means is that what Sean tells you essentially weighs against any practical arguments that could come up possibly in this later in this debate from CG or CO, and we explicitly weigh against CO because our principle is independent of all other outcomes, right? But first, before I go into my speech proper, some tangential responses to the case coming up from OG. The thrust of OG's case that is only left standing therefore is the idea that you will be messed up for life because of the fact that your partner cheated on you, i.e. you will suffer horrible emotional consequences. I want to point out that in status quo, at least a relatively normal number of people get cheated on in their relationship at any point in time, right? That's why cheating is such, like, say, a common dating experience. What this necessarily means is that 30% of people, like, say, aren't completely fucked up for the rest of their lives just because their partner cheated on them. Human beings have coping mechanisms, human beings have friends, human beings have other ways to deal with it, like, I don't know, seeing a therapist, for instance. What this means is that you cannot say someone is going to be irreversibly harmed for the rest of their life simply because they found out their partner cheated on them. Even if 10 years is a relatively normal relationship, we think human beings are somewhat like tentative in their ability to be able to get over these types of things. We don't think the irreparable harms that OG talks about is ever something that's going to manifest, right? So now I want to talk about the practical aspect of this debate, since we've already proven why we've won on a principle level and this weighs against all else. I think the first thing I want to talk about is why you're likely going to be able to talk it over with your significant other, and secondly, why even if you dump them, that's necessarily a good thing. And this ties into Sean's third point, right? When he says that your present unhappiness, for instance, could lead to future happiness, but what is important is that when you make the decision to, like, say, pursue that relationship with them in the future, the fact is that you want to do this knowing that, you know, the fact that they cheated on you in the past. So on this, the first tier, right? I think even though 10 years is a long time and you do have some stability with them, first of all, I just want to point out that administrative difficulties that OG talks about isn't necessarily a reason why people should choose to stay in a relationship that we feel is bad for them. This is necessarily something that happens in an abusive relationship. We don't think that's a good thing. But even if we want to take OG on, right, we think that the fact that you have developed bonds over the past 10 years, that there's some degree of trust, means that you're likely going to be able to talk this relationship out, right? I think we can all agree that meaningful relationships are based on trust, your ability to talk things out. If the person really loves you as much as OG says and that they just screwed up in the moment, we don't think there's any reason why this necessarily won't work and you necessarily have to be so afraid of even bringing this up with them, right? We think relationships grow when people talk about their issues with one another and are able to fix it, even though the fact that happens in the past. I think the fact that on OG's side, the individual in question is unable to want to talk about it because they're afraid of the outcomes likely means that this is not even a really healthy relationship in the first place, in which case we're perfectly happy to trade it off. The second thing I want to talk about is why even if you dump them, that's okay and a good thing. I think first of all, when it comes to your life, right, 10 years shouldn't be the sunk cost fallacy on which you live and die on, especially when you think the person is the one for the rest of your life, right? We think this individual ought to be able to make the decision, and insofar as they feel that it is a good thing, we're perfectly happy to do that because it maximizes their preference of choices. Why are people not going to randomly turn against you? People in society generally do not, like, say, pander well to infidelity. People are always on the side of the person who gets cheated on. it's simply easier to sympathize with them. It goes against some societal values. So we don't think all of the outcomes of losing your friends and family is ever going to be something that is likely to arise. So the second thing I want to talk about, and this addresses OG's point on ignorance is bliss, right? Ignorance is bliss only insofar as you remain ignorant. And some of reasons why you don't remain ignorant. So what does OG tell you on this? OG essentially says that they won't cheat on you later because the trade-off is higher and that they are likely to want to overcompensate. I think no, I first want to point out that people generally cheat later on the relationship when they get dissatisfied. This is why men who are 50 years old choose to leave their wife for a significantly younger woman, even though presumably there's a very high trade-off because they have 2 kids, a house, and a dog, right? What this necessarily means is that you cannot guarantee the fact that they will not cheat on you in the future. The fact that you're already in a relationship and they chose to cheat on you means that there's some degree of character flaw in them, i.e. the idea that they don't respect fidelity. I think second of all, the motion slide only states that you found out about this one instance of cheating, and I think this is what CO preempts at in their POI, right? There likely could have been more instances of cheating that you simply did not find out, right? And why is this particularly harmful? The fact that you've gone 10 years without finding out that they cheated on you means that first of all, they're likely good at covering things up. And the second thing is that they're okay with covering things up. So even if future issues don't have to deal with infidelity, the fact that they're not necessarily honest to you is always going to be a sticking point that could tell of other possible issues that could arise in the relationship in the future. And I think the fact, and people cheat for a number of reasons, right? Not just because they generally are unhappy. It's not just because they generally just mess up, right? I think the most common one is that they're unhappy with the relationship. Of second is that, I don't know, maybe they like the thrill of it. What this means is that the person is predisposed to do this in the future. We rather the individual knows now and can be cautious about it in the future, even if they want to continue the relationship, because this means that they are able to avoid, like, say, future instances of this happening when the cost is necessarily higher. So back to the main reason of why we win the debate, right? I think what we've proven here is independent of all outcomes. We've proven why, in spite of, like, say, whatever happiness or whatever unhappiness is going to be caused in the future, we necessarily help this individual make the best choice, even if they are not necessarily happier. And even if we take the trade-off on that, what we believe we accord this individual is a life with some dignity, a life where they're able to self-actualize, a life where they feel they did not trade off their dignity for some type of utilitarian happiness or of this avoidance of administrative difficulties that OG wants to talk about. Proud to oppose.
Thanks for that speech, DLO. Now to open the closing half, let's welcome member of government. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. I prefer
could you read the motion again? Sorry, just to confirm.
Oh, what's the motion? This also as a person at this point in time with the pill in their hands would take the pill.
I there's like some gain. Like, I could hear you, but there's some gain in the microphone if you're interested in fixing it. But other than that, like, it's legit. We can hear it clearly. There's just some distortion.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, then is it fine for me to start? Is everything just okay with? Yeah, thank you. Yeah. My speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Let me respond to opening opposition's framing, because opening opposition's framing is that, hey, like, this is like the reason why outcome is independent, because you make a choice that is an exercisement of your identity, and that is actually the reason that's why it is possible the outcome is not the like main factor for you. But I think this is actually contingent upon you proving that outcome is actually not an important factor for you to like consider when you actually make a choice. And that's why I think their second argument of like trying to value truth is not necessarily that much of a persuading issue. And I'm going to give you 2 responses to this as well. Number 1, they say that future outcome is not necessarily the important value, because like people we should still make a decision that is independent from future like outcome consideration at the end of the day. But I think that actually feeds into our type of narrative, because what we are saying is that, especially when you actually have the present information that something has happened, and therefore we actually have based on that information, regardless of whether or not I am going to be able to remember this or not, because I think this is something that is important, because I think this is something that I want to take a pill, and I'm going to actually make this decision at the end of the day, right? And secondly, they talk about like things like religion. I think like religious framework is actually a very like good parallel on the our side of the house as well, especially when people actually still believe in like creationism, especially when there's a bunch of like scientific evidences that actually prove that creationism is wrong and evolutionism is right. People still believe into that because people think that religious like framework is very, very important for their identity as well. So insofar as I am able to prove to you that this person is going to actually make a value judgment based upon something else other than truth, and I think I'm able to prove that. But our first extension is actually going to prove to you that even under their set of the metric, for example, like it is truth, it is based upon like you actually making your decision based upon like true information. I don't necessarily think that is going to be materialized under their set of the house, because during the process you digest the information that this person has cheated on you before like 10 years. I think number one, there are so many other like variables that you cannot necessarily identify. For example, this person might have been drunk, right? All those type of informations are still existing there, but the problem is that you cannot necessarily verify that because it is too long time ago. But secondly, I think your partner also have the incentive to persuade you in a way that is beneficial to themselves, right? Because this partner still opted into relationship with you for like 10 years, which means that this partner is also quite much content with the current relationship that is happening with you. And that exactly is a reason as why this person is going to frame himself or herself in a way that is actually beneficial for them. That exactly is a reason as why I think it's extremely harmful. You don't actually have access to actually check whether or not this is actually true or not at the end of the day. That exactly is a reason as why I think the scenario is either A, you have to accept the information that is coming from your partner, or secondly, you don't believe and accept that information and therefore construct the own version of your partner at the end of the day, right? So either side, I have proven to you that the person that you're judging upon, the person that has cheated upon you, is a made-up version of a partner who actually cheated 10 years ago at the end of the day, right? But thirdly, even in the best case scenario, maybe you actually have a very like accurate source of information about 10 years ago. I think this person throughout the course of 10 years actually have evolved into a different person from what that person was from 10 years ago, right? Because you actually have a lot of like, for example, like because 10 years has passed, the environment that you're living in is also different. And secondly, you actually have emotional and intimate interaction with you and your partner. For example, like having your own language that you guys can only understand, like having like being exposed to hobbies that you never got interested in before because your partner likes that, or like you actually having a different value perspective about like the world, or like being like exposed to other type of like social movement narratives or whatnot. Like these things actually prove that this person, your partner, actually have changed as a result of the accumulation of the experiences that has happened through the course of 10 years, right? That exactly is a reason as why under your set of the house, you actually have to judge this past version of person who is quite different or unsure if this person is actually an accurate version of past. And you have to penalize the present version of your partner based upon that particular past version of your partner. The problem is that all the harms are going to be present for you living right now, right? Things like having assets or things like not having like coping mechanism or whatnot. This exactly is the reason that's why we give better engagement to opening opposition, because we buy into the narrative, buy into the metric of opening opposition about like trying to refer to the truth. Well, we have told you as to why this information, this source of information about 10 years ago is not necessarily a reliable source of truth at the end of the day. That's why in terms of their metric, I think it is quite much likely that this person would be better off when this person just takes the pill at the end of the day. That exactly is a reason as why you also weigh over opening government, because they simply say that practical is important, does not necessarily engage into their own metric of opening opposition. That's why you're superior to them as well. And we also believe that closing oppositions like material, which probably would be about like why this person has like higher like possibility of cheating even right now, I think this also engages upon their material as well. Because I think even in the best case scenario, worst case scenario under our side, when this partner actually consistently tries to cheat cheat upon you, I think still under our side of the house, what happens is that you don't have that prior version of that past version of that partner. And now you only have the present version of your partner. And that is the only version of your partner that can refer to when you actually make the decisions to, for example, like break up or whatnot. But under your side of the house, you are going to be constantly influenced by the past version of your partner that has been already constructed by your memory. And that exactly is the reason that's why your decision-making process is going to be much more distracted under your side of the house. The second thing I want to talk about is that's why additional harm is going to happen. I think OG quite talked about a lot of things, but I think there's the support mechanism that I'm going to talk about is the most important issue. Notice that especially when you have 10 years of social relationship, your social circle becomes very, very dense, very, very small and dense at the end of the day, because like probably your friend is probably your partner's friend as well. Your partner's friend become your friend because like we all get like intertwined. We all try to like get to parties or like try to have lunch together. Well, no, that exactly is the reason I say from the moment when you try to actually solve these type of like problem about cheating, number one, you lose large portion of your like social circle that you have relied upon and had emotional relationship with because of you having a very like conflict with your partner at the end of the day, right? But secondly, even if you assume that some people are going to still remain, I think you are going to be worried that you are putting too much emotional burden to your limited number of friends, and you're kind of going to be worried that these friends are going to even leave you at the end of the day. The third thing is that I think they talk about things, people like counselors, but they don't actually know the like specific context and specific memories that these friends have access to, and that's why these people are the most important people that you have to rely on, but you lose them, and that's why I think we think yeah, we win. Thanks.
Thank you for that speech, member of government. Now to open the answer round, let's welcome opposition with. Here.
All right, just confirming I can be seen and heard.
Yep, loud and clear.
Perfect. Just give me a moment. When I read this motion, so many random questions popped into my head, which unfortunately were not answered by the other teams in this round. And closing opposition's case is very simply answering those questions to explain why taking this pill would be disastrous for this person. 3 things in this speech. Firstly, why our extension totally wins the debate. Secondly, in terms of closing government. And lastly, in terms of opening government. Let's then talk about our extension. We gave you 2 unique pieces of extension. And the first bit was in terms of framing. We gave you 2 pieces of framing that changed the landscape of the debate. Firstly, you do not know if your partner has kept cheating on you for this period of time by virtue of the motion. Note that opening opposition tries to take credit for this framing, but does not explain the relevance of this framing to the debate, which I'll do in a second. Opening government's response is, well, they're rational actors, so they won't cheat on you now that there's a 10-year relationship. But people don't cheat for rational reasons. They cheat for emotional reasons. They're not likely to think, oh, it's a 10-year relationship, you know, I really ought not to cheat. No, they do it emotionally. So you cannot just say that they will not cheat on your side of the house. We do not know if this person has cheated more recently. If anything, past behavior is a good predictor of future behavior, which means it is likely that they've cheated on you again at some point in the future. The second bit of framing we brought you was, importantly, you can be re-exposed. You could find out this information again at some point. If you have found it out once, and again, no team answers the question of how you found out this information. If you have found it out once, you may well find it out again. It is likely that you will come across it again, especially if they have continued cheating on you. It is likely you will find that at some point. At which point, the opposition case simply increases the harm because you are delaying this decision further and you're having to make this decision twice, which means that you're increasing the emotional burden on this person. That proves that government's world is not all roses, where you are able, as opening government says, to just like magically reconcile your relationship and be totally fine for the rest of time. It is likely to deteriorate in many of the ways opening government talks about, and you're increasing the harm because you're doing it later, which means you've got increased sunk costs, which opening government wants to talk about so much. Second bit of our extension, and most important in terms of like practical contribution, is how this creates massive trauma for these people, even when they cannot retain the memory. There are a few key parts. Firstly, this memory is likely to be incredibly traumatic for reasons that are largely outlined by opening government, which Frang also talks about in her speech. Secondly, you lose the memory, but you retain the trauma. And the comparison we give you is people who suffer dissociative amnesia, like, for example, victims of sexual assault, who cannot remember those events at all, cannot recall those events for the rest of their lives in many instances, but still retain that trauma, still get triggered when someone touches them in a way that they find to be intimate, which means that you can retain that trauma even if you do not retain the memory. And closing government's response is to say, well, we can fiat that they have no memory whatsoever, but no, because you cannot fiat that in terms of how amnesia works, and trauma remains and changes your brain chemistry. You cannot fiat that we rewire this person's brain chemistry in the future as well. That's not part of the motion, which means that they are likely to retain this trauma. Their next response at CG is to say, well, this will fade over time. They do not give any reason for that. I would suggest to you that this is unlikely to fade at the point at which you do not understand the reason behind your trauma. That is why dissociative amnesia is so painful for these victims into the future, because they cannot even understand why they are traumatized and why they get triggered every time someone touches them in an intimate way, which means that they are likely to continue that trauma into the future because they do not understand it. The next thing I say is, well, it's worse when you have when you have the information about it because you're constantly reliving it. But no, it's worse on their side because you cannot understand that distress. On our side, when you understand the cause of that distress, you can do things like go and get therapy for it, which means you're able to treat it into the future and therefore have a better long-term outcome. The third thing we told you in this extension was it affects your relationship with your partner because you're distressed but do not know why, same as dissociative amnesia victims. That trauma can lead to multiple things, like, for example, the breakup that opening government was to talk about. Like, for example, as opening government was to talk about, just being miserable for the rest of your relationship because you distrust them, but under their world, you do not know why you distrust them. So it creates an intense emotional distress that you do not know about. So we co-opt the worst case from opening government, but with an additional harm of not knowing why you are traumatized and never being able to opt out of the relationship for that rational reason. We also told you you're more likely as a result to seek out information about, POI's in chat, thanks. Seek out information about why you are traumatized, which means looking into your partner, being suspicious of them, and re-exposing yourself to this information, as I talked about earlier. And fifthly, it causes general trauma and dysfunction. And closing government says this is symmetric with no reasons given. It is obviously not symmetric when you cannot understand why. That leads to intense distress, intense anxiety, and you're unable to solve it on their side of the house. Our extension is truly debate winning because it creates the trauma that opening government wants to talk about, but worse and untreatable, and you cannot opt out of it. So it is incredibly certain. I'll take a point from opening.
You assume that trauma is generated instantly once you know. No, it's an increasingly expansive thing over time. You generate trauma after knowing through instant time, but just knowing one time doesn't generate the same amount of trauma. It's significantly less. Engagement, please.
Yeah, that is wrong because you can be raped one time and still have a huge amount of trauma from it, even if it does not happen continually. One event can traumatize you. You're the ones who gave reasons why this was likely to lead to a huge amount of distrust, a huge amount of emotional distress. So it's your own case that is shooting you in the foot here. So let's then deal with closing government. The first claim they make is, well, this is not truly representative of your partner. I've already given you reasons why it may very well be. It's speculative because your partner could have cheated on you very recently as well. And at worst case, that means that we are benefiting them by acting fast. But I would say that the only way to know whether this is a true representation of your partner is under our side, where you do not take the pill and you're able to ask your partner about those things and therefore investigate what the situation was there. Whereas under their side, you cannot do that and you retain the trauma, as I said, which means that you're likely to have a worse outcome on their side. But the other thing about this claim is it mostly responds to opening opposition. It doesn't deal with the substance of the claim that we brought you from closing off. The second thing they say is, well, you lose your social circle. Again, this doesn't engage with our material, so we're still massively blowing this out of the water. And secondly, opening up already preempted this by talking about how people are likely to side with the person who got cheated on, which means that closing gov doesn't really get any ground there. So let's deal with opening gov. They say, well, you sabotage your relationship, but their characterization of people in these relationships is like they're all incredibly, incredibly insecure and incredibly jealous people over something that happens 10 years ago. Most like a lot of people can repair these relationships because that they know that it's valuable to them in the future. So the comparative is not all of these relationships fail. Maybe some of them fail, and maybe some of them have sunk costs, but some people will get over it. Compare that to under their side, all of these people are traumatized and they do not know why because they cannot ever investigate the roots of their trauma. I work at the family court. People meet outside divorce courts and get married in the future. People are able to get over it, whereas on opening government and closing government's world, they never get over it. That massively traumatizes them. Vote CO.
Hello, hello. Could I be heard now?
Yes, we can
Yes.
hear you.
Okay, sorry for that. Now welcoming opposition whip to finally end this round. Here, here.
Sorry, what?
I think he lost track of the round. I think that was the last week.
Sorry, yeah, sorry. I was too
I was
heavy in
I
my
was off
notes.
whip.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for that, opposition whip, and that ends this round. So I'm welcoming everyone to virtually cross the house. That's such a long round. I actually lost it because I was in my notes reviewing it already. So I enjoyed everyone to cross the house again. Thank you for that amazing